things from the last, and the chapter 21, I did do a video. So if somebody wants to look at the video, that's good. But we're going to go over chapter 21 today, because in chapter 20 was about the commandment not to bear false witness. A lot of people have questions about what does it mean not to bear false witness against your neighbor. Specifically deals with lying under oath. So when you look at it, we're not talking about outside of that. There are lots of different kinds of lies, and part of the discussion we had was, when the midwives in Egypt were lying to Pharaoh, and so God more than the laws of Pharaoh. Well, what does that mean? It means that under some circumstances, lying to promote a higher good was okay. But lying under oath is prohibited. So for all the fine print and everything. And they're bringing up the be yea and your nay be nay. So Jesus is taking it outside of the realm of a court hearing. And I don't think Jesus' intent was, Jesus was using half answers and things like that to, when Jesus was speaking, what you were hearing was, I'm going to give you a half answer. His followers and the general population away from the concept of always going to the law for your guidance on whether or not you should do something. Ranking official who was caught in doing something that was not appropriate. And when he was questioned about it, he said, there is no prevailing legal authority to prohibit that behavior. Well, that doesn't mean it was right. It just meant that he could be prosecuted for it, okay? But what Jesus is saying is, in all of your dealings, not lie to an enemy or something like that, but he was saying, generally speaking, you should be a person of your word. So, about a product or honest feedback for how, so that's, but some people take it as an absolute, you end up with all kinds of situations where you could do a great deal of damage by telling the truth. Done a great deal of damage if I had told the truth. Like what the meaning of the code, just don't do that. So anyway, are there any other residual questions about chapter 20 that we need to deal with? Now, before we get into chapter 21, which, and building altars and things like that, this whole section, 20, 21, well, the end of 20, and then have to do with governing society, and are generally to be found in many cases within bodies of laws that existed in the ancient Near East. The Code of Hammurabi from the Sumerian culture out of Iraq is the first written down body of laws that we've been able to discover so far. And much of what's in the Code of Hammurabi, and you're going to see in Leviticus and Numbers and Deuteronomy as well. So it's not that these things are unique necessarily to Hebrew culture, but more or less common laws that you would find in that area, in that region. And they speak, inspire us in principle, but they do not bind us necessarily, because they deal with the governance of a society which we would find absolutely abhorrent today. So for us to follow these laws would mean that which we don't want to do, okay? One of the problems, this is me, one of the problems that I see with Sharia law is that it has not evolved past the written word in the Quran, that they haven't, some societies have, but I lived in a society that had not, and it was extremely oppressive, and it reflected a lot of what we're going to see. Laws concerning slaves. These are the ordinances that you shall set before them. When you buy a male Hebrew slave, he shall serve 6 years. In the 7th year, he shall go out a free person without debt. All right, what is this talking about? We're not talking about chattel slavery. Chattel slavery is where a person is bought or sold, and they remain a slave for life. Okay, they are an ancient form of bankruptcy. So a person who can't fulfill their debt requirements can be sold into slavery to resolve that debt, okay? And in some cases, which we're seeing happening today, is that a person will essentially from someone and then pay it back with their labor. Most of the people who are flooding across our borders today are indentured servants. The cartel is going to charge them a certain amount for them coming across the border. They have to pay it back with their labor once they get across the border, because most of them can't front them. So it's happening today, okay? But it is, unlike this, unregulated. So that a person could be an indentured servant in this country today for more than the allotted 6 years. Okay, if he comes in single, he shall go out single. If he comes in married, then his wife shall go out with him. Servants, that marriage is respected. Okay, so this implies, I'm not sure that it's effective, but it implies that the sanctity of marriage has to be respected by the master if a husband and wife come into indenture together. Okay, the wife and her children shall be her masters, and he shall go out alone. So what the master is doing is loaning him a wife. And what is the benefit to that? The benefit is that he's going to get more slaves out of it. Okay? There's also the possibility that this person will fall. Okay, if the slave declares, I love my master, my wife, and my children, I will not go out a free person. Then his master shall bring him before God. When they say bring him before God, they mean bring him before the city elders, the council, or the judge that's been assigned. He shall be brought to the door or doorpost, and his master shall serve him for life. So now he becomes an indentured servant for life. He's not the same thing as a chattel slave, but he's an indentured servant for life. Okay? There are more protections for an indentured servant than there are for chattel slave. Okay. As a slave, she shall not go out as the male slaves do. If she does not please her master, who designated her for himself, then he shall let her be redeemed. That means that the family can buy her back. Okay?
Is that the family can buy her?
Well, I suspect, this is me, it's not written in here, but I suspect that if the family does not buy her back, that he could put her up for grabs. Yeah. He shall have no right to sell her to a foreign people, since he has dealt unfairly with her. Okay? Gentile, but he can sell her to a Hebrew. And the idea is that they're trying to keep things within the Hebrew community. Okay? She's property, And the idea is that this community is protecting its own property. That has to do with land sales and other things as well. Okay, where does all this come from? We're wondering, because, you know, this differentiation between male and female, the creation narrative, okay? There are two creation narratives in Genesis. In one of them, God creates man and woman at the same time, and they are helpmates to each other, they're co-equal, okay? In the second narrative, the one with Adam and Eve, they do something wrong, and then God curses them. And the curse for the woman, there are two curses for women. One is that childbirth is going to be really painful. And the other one is that she will be subordinate to her husband, okay? So she is going to be her husband's slave. And that's where this cultural thing comes from. It proceeds from that. So when I did marriage counseling, one of the things in the United Methodist Order is we do not ask, will you, in other circles, okay? We don't have that. The vows that the man takes are for marriage. And the reason why we do that is that Christian marriage is not about a residual curse. Not supposed to be anyway. Okay? So, creation story where men and women are created equal. And not the second one where one is subordinate to the other just by gender. And that's an expression of God's curse. Okay? So what we're trying to have preceded. So anyway, when you see this gender differentiation all through the Bible, then know that it comes from that second creation narrative in Genesis. Okay. She's not going to be treated as a slave if there's a marriage involved. Okay. It's not. These arrangements are not always supposed to end with a marriage. She could just be an indentured servant, or actually more like chattel servant, slave for life. But if there's a marriage involved, then that changes the relationship. Himself, he shall not diminish the food, clothing, or rights of his first wife. And if he does not do these three things for her, she shall go out without debt, without payment of money. Where she's going out to, I'm not sure. Okay? When I was in Saudi, they have some interesting things in the paper. They have a Dear Mullah column. And at least, I don't know if they still do, but they had a Dear Mullah column, which was really interesting. It's like our Dear Abby column, you know. And so they asked the mullah what to do. And this one guy married a woman and got the dowry and everything from her family. And then he thought that she'd had an affair, divorce, okay? So she goes back to her family and faithful, he does not have to return the dowry. But it was later determined that she was not unfaithful. Now what? Well, the options are that her family can send her back to him, or he has to pay them the dowry. Okay?
Is that the law?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's Sharia law. Okay? Things in there that would just, you know, if I have relations with a goat, can I eat the goat? And, you know, and then there was, if I have relations with a small child, what are my responsibilities to the small child? And, you know, because they've messed up the kid's ability to be pawned off as a virgin. And, you know, and so Dear Mullah gets, I mean, so out of the way.
What happens to him for lying?
For what?
For lying,
For lying.
Oh, yeah, that man,
man.
that man.
You said she was unfaithful.
Yes.
Said she was unfaithful.
Well, that wasn't a lie, that was a mistake.
Well, again, what happens to him for making a mistake?
If he makes the mistake, if the dowry, that's the extent of it.
Well, what if he doesn't repay the dowry?
then that's considered theft, and you can lose a hand over that. Yeah.
Now, who,
Sharia law is religious law, and it's enforced by the religion, okay? And much of it bleeds over to the laws of the state. But if you live in a Sharia community, the laws of the state are super.
What he says is actually carried out?
Yes.
You're like your Abby, and she just goes on.
It depends on the rank of the mullah too. You know. Some mullahs have more credibility than others, more authority than others. You know.
so if you see it in the newspaper and the mullah says this, then you can count on the fact that it's gonna.
I'm glad your Abby didn't have that power.
Good, yeah, good.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they enforce it, the religious community enforces Sharia law. And I know that this, in Islamic countries, that the state will also enforce Sharia. Abu Dhabi, with a bottle of water in my hand during the day, a local cop could arrest me and throw me in prison for it.
While they having a bottle of wine?
Yeah, you're not supposed to have water or food during the day in Ramadan. Yeah. Women in UAE, from what I saw, were able to dress any way they wanted. But if something were to happen to that woman and she was inappropriately dressed, the local authorities would charge her with the crime.
So even if you were a foreigner, which you were, you still.
Oh, you have no rights over there. They can break a contract with an infidel without
Why in the
repercussion.
world does anybody want to go?
I agree.
I mean,
Because there's money there.
Yeah.
Oil there.
There's oil money.
There is money there, yeah. And if you are from a third world country, they will treat you very badly, but you will have a job,
Yeah.
okay? You can't retire there, you can't own anything, you know, once you turn 60, you have to go back to your homeland. Yeah, they're interesting, because there really are no human rights over there that you can claim very much.
and where exactly is this that you're,
Well, yeah,
in other words, where Jesus and his disciples?
no, because that's Israel. You have some rights in Israel. Although there's some controversy right now about whether or not that's going to persist. So, but yeah, if you're going to travel abroad, be sure you understand what kind of a culture and what kind of laws you're going to encounter in that country.
So if you're in Iraq or Iran or Saudi Arabia, they're all Muslim,
Yeah.
but their laws are different, they're
Oh, yes.
all different.
We could not drink alcohol. In Iraq, we could.
Was that because you were a foreigner?
No, that's because of their local laws. There is a secular prohibition on alcohol in Saudi Arabia, and there are certain circumstances, like for instance, if you live in an American, people who want to drink alcohol can find alcohol.
Never been.
There are shops in UAE where you can go and buy alcohol, but if you were a Muslim, you would be arrested if you went into that store. Same thing with pork. There are restaurants in UAE, in UAE, you can go to a restaurant. I went to a restaurant where they had pork, but the pork was not for Muslims, and the preparation area was completely separate from the rest of food preparation. Still maintained in Sharia law to a large extent. You know, this differentiation between the rights of genders. very prominent in Islamic countries and cultures.
So you say Sharia law, is that practiced within a community, within a country, or does the whole country practice?
Depends on the country. There is Sharia law in the eastern population in Minnesota, and there are places where local law enforcement is as welcome as it would be on an Indian reservation. They're just not invited in. There are like no-go zones for local cops in Minneapolis,
Wow.
and the community is governed by Sharia law, and that's unconstitutional, shall I say?
I know, I was gonna say, it seems that would be unconstitutional,
Yes,
but
it is.
Well, who controls that?
The community does.
well, who allows it outside? I mean,
It is tolerated.
But our government does nothing about it.
Does nothing about it. I think if somebody's constitutional rights are violated and there is a complaint that with an honor killing or something like that.
Now, I thought Brenda just said that our government just says, looks the other way, so to speak, but you said their government. Now, what are you talking about?
I'm talking about the government of Minneapolis and Minnesota.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
Probably it's never reported. I mean, if they govern themselves,
Their own local Sharia courts. So, I mean-
Do they vote?
yes, they're citizens. Yes, they're citizens. Stuff about some even members of Congress as far as citizenship goes, but that's for someone else to decide. Okay. Okay, so this is another thing. My brother-in-law was approached because one of his coworkers got married again. You don't get divorced, you get married again. And they wanted to know why he didn't take a second wife,
Who?
my brother-in-law,
Where is he?
in UAE,
Oh,
yeah.
he's an Aiden.
He said, if I have a first wife and she has a house and a Mercedes and I marry a second wife, I've got to give her a house and a Mercedes. Okay? Okay, if this is the young lady who was given to settle a debt and the second wife gets more than she does, the first wife can walk. Can't deny her rights as a wife.
But where do they walk to?
yes.
That's the question.
And who allows her to walk? I mean,
The
I know it's
law. The
but-
law.
But I mean, in actuality, I wonder if she really is able
Can walk
to
out.
walk.
That depends, much of that depends on her family and whether or not her family would accept the bat. Okay, otherwise she would just be an unprotected woman in a society that is not really fair to women. All right, well, the second section of this has to do with the laws concerning violence. And there's some interesting nuances in that, but I don't think we have time really to get into it. So if you have any questions, if you're watching this and you have some questions, you can contact me at revlev@nccumc.org and send me a question. And if you want to follow up with an email, some of you did from while I was away, and I really appreciated that. But I enjoy the feedback, and I cherish your questions. So we'll pick it up at verse 12 when we come back next Sunday. So God bless you. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Dennis.
Thank you, and thank you for being back.
Yeah.
It was great.